Hello everyone, it's me Maali and I know I haven't posted a video, it's been long enough, so I decided I'm going to be making a book review. So I'm going to be making a book review of a really famous book that is being pretty famous in today's world and whatsoever. It has just won the Booker Prize and the book's name is The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida. Its writer is Shehan Karunatilaka, and I guess he wrote it in a fictional kind of way, which happened to describe all about Sri Lanka's political situation at that time, which I'm going to tell you briefly about. So let me tell you about the book first. It has won the Booker Prize. It was first published in hardcover as chats with the dead, and then in a refined sort of way, a new publication. It was published as The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida. As I've said, the writer is Shehan Karuna Tilaka, and I guess he is a really good writer to have won the Booker Prize, and this is proved because this book is wrote in such an interesting way that even I am shocked. The only thing that is wrong with this book is that I couldn't put it down. I couldn't just stop reading it. It was that interesting, and I don't know if the reader found it as amusing and as interesting as me, but I am involved in these kind of stuff. Now let me tell you about the story. So at the first, a person named Maali Almeida wakes up into what seems like an office full of dead people, as he is dead and he knows that he has been murdered, and then he goes onto the office and enters his name and whatsoever. The name Seven Moons actually refers to 7 days and 7 nights, and Maali Almeida has got 7 days and 7 nights to find out who murdered him, who killed him, and before getting eaten by the Mahakali. He's kind of stuck in the place which the writer imagines as the in-between, and there are many ghouls and ghosts, and you're practically supposed to find out who murdered you by being carried by a wind, and the wind takes you to a sort of a place where your name is being taken. For example, if a person is dead and that person's name is being taken in some other part of the country, then the wind helps the person to reach there and find out about how he got killed, if he is killed, then how he was dead, how he ended up dead and whatsoever. And in coughs and sneezes, all his memory was coming back to him. He had already forgotten who he was and what he was doing there, but slowly he started to remember all that was happening in his life. But he actually couldn't remember who murdered him, who killed him, and that's whatsoever. Well, and then while searching, I also found out more about the Sri Lanka's civil war. This is actually a period between 1989 and 1990, and actually Maali Almeida is a war photographer, as the war was going on there and a civil war was going on there, and I learned about terms such as JVP and LTTE. LTTE, which were the revolutionary parties that were searching for their own rights. And in my country, Nepal, there was a 10-year-long Maoist war or civil war, just like in Sri Lanka, but the Sri Lanka's time duration was big. It was 25 years, and I cannot even imagine how can people live 25 years under such terror, under such disgrace, under such murders happening every second on each and every part of the country. I'm actually shocked. And he is a war photographer who wants to take this thing out, who wants to take ladies being dragged out of trucks and buses without police doing anything. The police just watch. They are helpless as the woman screams, and then young children beaten to death, and he himself has died. He wanted to show those pictures to all over the world so that his country's civil war would also stop, and the people would know what was actually happening, what was the country's situation at that time of the civil war. So I got to learn more about Sri Lanka's background too, and that really helped me know. And actually these terms I really did not understand them, but due to outside help, due to outside learning, I learned about these LTTs and JVPs, who were they, what they did, etc, etc. And basically he's just focusing on his photographs and where to find them. And there is a power called the whisper. You can whisper. The ghosts and the ghouls should be able to whisper in a living person's ear. in order to talk to them and tell them. But Malinda, his name is Malinda, and Maali does not have that power to whisper. He's searching frantically, and then he meets a person named Sena Pathirana, who also happens to be his mate, his friend. Then he meets another character named Dr. Rani, and she is also her mate, also helps him in the process, etc., etc. Now, the middle of the content is pretty really interesting, because you don't want to keep the book down, you don't want to leave it, you don't want to have lunch, and you just want to keep reading the book, and it's written in such an interesting way. And this story is, I have to say, in overall, this story is actually a murder mystery, a murder type of thing, where a person is murdered, and he has 7 days and 7 nights to find out who murdered him, when was he murdered. When was he murdered? Where was he murdered? And he was murdered in the Beira Lake, as many of the people died in there because they were killed, actually. Because during that time, there was a war going on, and anybody who opposed the army would be killed, and anybody supporting the JVP and the LTTEs, or were one of them, would be killed too. And he was a war photographer working for many companies. Also, he was a gambler. He had many friends, and the friends, when they talked about Maali, he sort of caught a wind, and then went to the place, and at last he found out who his murderer was. His murderer was a character named Stanley, who was actually a father of his boyfriend, Didi. Yeah, he was actually a homosexual person, and it also describes what a homosexual person feels. As you know, during that time, being a homosexual person was really hard. That, in the present situation, it's not that hard to express your feelings to anybody. So I think the writer has also written about how a homosexual person was treated, or how a homosexual person felt during that time. And actually, this is all a murder mystery kind of things. There are many things entangled in it. And he's just stuck in between, a place called In Between. And Dr. Rani, who is also his mate, she's also his mate, suggests him to go into the light. Well, the writer says that he named it the light because when we say a place called heaven, we expect it to be full of clouds, full of lights, full of happiness, and there is no trace, a grim of sadness, a grim or a sadness. So that's what the writer wrote. And when you went into the light, you would forget everything, be reborn, etc., etc. There were many parts of it. And then, if you didn't enter the light and were stuck in the in-between, you would get eaten by the Mahakali if you have completed your 7th moon, and you haven't been able to find out the person who did it. So he was once almost been eaten by the Mahakali. He found out that his friend Zaki was trapped in a place where there were all sorts of torture, and that's when the Mahakali gave him three times to whisper, and then after the deed was done, he would eat. But the Mahakali would eat Maali Almeida, but he was rescued by a friend ghost who was also the ghost of a minister, and he rescued the Maali Almeida from the Mahakali's clutches, from the Mahakali's hands, and that's how he escaped, freed his friend Zaki, and that's how the story ends. Basically, if you want to learn anything new from this book, then you can learn all about Sri Lanka's history, the period between 1989 and 1990, about how Sri Lanka had suffered there, and etc., etc. So this book is really interesting, and I think that's the reason why it got the Booker Prize. And I'm so happy that I learned about Sri Lanka too, because it's a country that most of us don't know about. We don't know about Sri Lanka's history, and I would really like to thank the writer for writing this book. Thank you.